Hello, and welcome to Data Demystified, the podcast where we look beyond the buzzwords to find value in MarTech, AI, and data for marketing. My name is Kevin van Kalkeren. I am CPO at Onmark, and in this episode, we're revisiting something that we talked about in the past, and that feels like Marketing 101 segmentation. Because we know the drill, we define our audience, we then tailor our message, we optimize the results, and then we repeat, basically. Today, we're going to unpack why segmentation often gives you a false sense of precision and what to focus on instead if you really want to understand your audience and scale your impact. And we want to avoid the pitfalls that comes with bad segmentation. So let's start with why segmentation feels good. I think it already makes sense to us psychologically. It gives us the illusion of control because we're not just running a campaign willy-nilly, we're targeting urban women, aged 30 to 35, with a design interest. And that sounds strategic, like you really know what you're doing. You feel like a sniper, not like a shotgun marketeer just trying to blast and see what hits. And platforms and tools that help us build advertising and build this audience that reinforce that sense of control. They hand you predefined segments, lookalikes, interests, ways to retarget people that look like your audience and so on. And the numbers look really precise because they know how big the audience is and what you can expect in the next couple of days in terms of clicks or views, impressions, interactions, engagement. But here's the reality. Most of those segments are based on loose behavior proxies, vague interests, inferred demographics, behavior that someone did some kind in the past and maybe is indicative of their gender or interest. So we've talked about this in the past as well. There's been studies done about this, where you can run ads aimed at women in a certain age category. And when you include a survey in your landing page or in the ad itself, the response might turn out that half of that women audience actually is made up of men, which means you're basically doing like a 50-50 coin toss when it comes to who is your actual audience and what you think your audience is. So just like your total audience, it's kind of a gamble what you're doing there. So you're not targeting better, you're just targeting differently. And possibly you're misleading yourself in the process and throwing away money into an audience that's not suitable for your needs, your customer journeys. Now, even if your segment was accurate because you have better data or the platform itself is better at that, the question is, can you scale? So if you have a very well-defined audience, which is hyper-targeted and delivers an 80% or 90% CTR, and we only have a handful of people, maybe 10, is it worth the effort? I mean, we can over-optimize, but then we are left with a very low absolute number of people that we can reach and convert into customers that actually pay the bills. Can we then really produce 15, 20 variations of content for those 15 micro-segments? How are we going to actually measure the impact that we made with that? How much media budget and operational energy are you spending for marginal gain? I mean, we have AI now. We can probably produce a lot of content willy-nilly on the fly. But still, is it worth doing that in a data-driven manner? Can we actually see how much it's gaining for us? So the question is, does this actually in the long term benefit us as well? Another angle is the research done by Byron Sharp and his compatriots. Their research shows broad targeting the entire market, usually outperforms precision targeting. Simply because reach matters, we want to build up availability, both mentally and physically, so that when people are in the market to buy your products and services, they know you exist and they know where to find you. But also because over-optimizing on people that might be your ideal customer with the ideal budgets and are very loyal, that typically tends to be throwing away money because those people don't just buy a lot from you, they also buy a lot from your competitor. So it's wiser in the long term to build and grow your brand by targeting the entire market rather than just a small segment of it. So all in other words, you might be winning at relevance or at least seeming relevance, we're losing impact. In every episode, we take a look at a buzzword or a common belief and break it down. And this time we also have a listener's question.
Everyone talks about microtargeting. Is it actually effective for small businesses?
Fair question. So let's see. Micro-targeting sounds like we have control, right? We've got hyper-specific groups. If we understand their needs, we can make hyper-relevant messaging for them, really addressing what they think, what they feel, what their tone of voice is, how they'd like to be persuaded, which should give us a better and sharper performance in our marketing. In practice, micro-targeting often creates segments that are too small to be reliable because we cannot test the outcome reliably, statistically. They might be too narrow to scale, If once you've are done with some demographic in a very niche group in a very niche region of the country, how are you going to scale to the next region? And they might be too fragile to repeat if you play into live events or certain other calendar events. Can you actually repeat the success you've ended up there? So we might end up spending time and budget trying to optimize for an audience that you don't really understand. You might have divided into containers that are very superficial labels, or we cannot even reach consistently because we don't know where they are at, where they can be found online. And for most businesses, the better move does is to start broad, observe the real behavior, and then find patterns in that behavior that tell you where the value is that you bring to the customer and the customer can bring to you. And then you can start optimizing, at least in the journey of orchestration. So that's where segmentation based on actions and not assumptions and faulty third-party data makes the difference. All right, so we talked about the risks, the pitfalls, segmentation, the superficial control it might give you. What do we do instead if that's not the way? So first off, I'd say you have to focus on behavior. So after you've targeted the entire market, how do we optimize? Looking at behavior, because that's the real insight. We want behavior, context, recurrence of people, how different data points correlate. So instead of asking, who do we think they are? Who is our audience? We have to start asking ourselves, what do they actually do? And what does that tell us? So useful questions might be, what's the behavioral path that leads to conversion? Because that might help us actually optimize how we get people to buy our products, find our services once we have them in the door. How many visits or actions precede that decision? Because we want to know how people become aware of our problems, the problems we solve for them, and how our problems are differentiated from our competitors. Which touch points are consistent across high value users, right? If you want to optimize for people that actually have a high order value, high customer lifetime value for us, what are touch points that are really crucial in their journey, getting to that first sale or maybe getting to retention? We want to know about that because that actually tells us about what they need and how we can best serve them. And are your best customers the ones you thought they were? Might turns out that, like with Byron Sharp, over-optimizing on what the seemingly best heavy category buyers are might end up being a losing game in the longer term. And this is where HiGem adds real value as well. Our platform doesn't just show you profile segments. It's not built for segmentation. It shows you real behavioral patterns across those tools, across the journey. Recurring sequences of events that correlate with outcomes. So telling you which blogs or which pages are very crucial in the step towards conversion, towards purchasing your products or services. Maybe exceptions and edge cases that your segments miss, right? Maybe dead ends in their journeys because there's questions they have that are not answered before they actually get to the purchase button. So instead of trying to design the perfect segment and trying to rig the game and hack the game of marketing and segmentation, you want to learn from the users who are already taking meaningful actions and build from there. And that's how you scale relevance and effectiveness. Okay, so if you want to sound smart at your next social gathering, here's a thought you can just casually throw out there at the drinks table. The most dangerous segments are the ones that look the most convincing. What that speaks to is they might look precise, and that's that false sense of security we talked about before. You're less likely to question it because, yes, of course, we want to look for females in this demographic from that age with this disposable income. Of course, we want to target males with an interest in cars. And that's when you start optimizing for an audience that might not even exist or might not be as superficial or clear or homogeneous as you think it does. So what do we take away from today? Segmentation feels strategic, but often misleads you into over-optimizing. Target the entire market, not just a very hyper-specific variation of the market. Labels don't predict behavior. Behavior reveals patterns, and the patterns lead to better outcomes. Platform-defined audiences, they can help you start, get a grip on marketing, get a grip on the market and traffic, but shouldn't guide your strategy. You know what works best for your journeys and work your way back from there. The tighter your segment, the harder it is to scale. And the easier it is to mislead yourself. So don't over-optimize trying to find the most narrow segment you can think of. If you want data to actually help you grow, stop trying to outsmart your audience in advance and start watching what they do. Optimize around their behavior because that's telling you what they need to get to the purchase. And HiGem helps you do just that by showing you these signals that matter across all tools and touchpoints so you can spend less time defining your audience and more time understanding them. Thanks for listening. And as always, if there's a buzzword or a belief you want broken down in a future episode, send it in. See you next time.